Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. On this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile and drone strike that took place during the previous night. The Russians used significant number of drones and missiles to attack facilities, military facilities, mainly in the western part of Ukraine. So this is the map that was published this morning, and here we can see once again lots of roads of attacks. Yellow roads means that the Russians attack the western part of Ukraine mainly with drones. Red lines means that the Russians use lots of cruise missiles, and blue lines means that the Russians use also hypersonic missiles. So as you can see, the main concentration of Russian fire took place mainly in the western part of Ukraine. The cities of Mukachevo, Lviv and Lutsk were under very heavy fire. Now let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about the most southwestern part of Ukraine, the city of Uzhgorod and the city of Mukachevo. Because according to information we have, the Russians attacked this territory with caliber missiles that were launched from the Black Sea. So during the previous night we received lots of videos, we received lots of updates regarding territory, regarding this area. So for example, this is the video that was published this morning, and here we can see the consequences of Russian attack. Smoke screen, black smoke screen means that something huge, something big was destroyed. Later the sources reported that the Russians destroyed some factory that Ukrainians used to produce some electronic parts. Russian sea-launched cruise missiles caliber hit an electronics manufacturing plant in the city of Mukachevo in the Zakarpattia region of the western Ukraine. Most likely the Ukrainians were using this plant to produce some military equipment, military electronics for their missiles, maybe for their drones, maybe for some other purposes. A very important military facility most likely was destroyed as a result of Russian caliber strike, and this is very important because this factory was destroyed not by drone, but this factory was destroyed as a result of attack of Russian caliber missile that was launched from the Black Sea. Another city that was under very heavy fire was the city by the name of Lviv. When talking about this map, once again, let's return. The Russians attacked the city of Lviv mainly with drones. According to this map, there was just one cruise missile that managed to get the city of Lviv. Main explosions and attacks were made by drones. So as for this area during the previous nights, we got several updates and several videos. In this video, we can see the consequences of Russian attacks. So as you can see, despite the number of drones that managed to get the city, the damage that the Russians managed to deal wasn't so big and huge in comparison, for example, with the city of Mukachevo. So just one building was damaged, and the top floor, as you can see. Another city that was attacked by the Russians, but not the city, but another region that was attacked by the Russians is the Lutsk region and the Dubna region. So, for example, in the city of Lutsk, we can see this video that was published during the previous night, and here we can see the work of Ukraine air defense. So we haven't received, as for the beginning of the 21st of August of 2025, any video or any picture that can confirm damage that the Russians managed to deal. So most likely when talking about the city of Lutsk, the Ukraine air defense managed to bring down every single drone and every single missile that was heading towards the city. The Russians also attacked the settlement of Dubna, and most likely when talking about this area, the Russians attacked this Dubna airfield. Most likely the Ukrainians were using or were planning to use this airfield with the purpose to bring F-16s from Europe, with the purpose to use these let's say aircrafts, let's say in air defense purposes or in purposes of further attacks, let's say deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation or along the line of combat contact. So let's return back to map. Also, as you can see, during the previous night, the Russians attacked some cities and settlements in the eastern part, in the central part of Ukraine. We're talking about the city of Zaporozhye, Dnipro, Pokrovsk, and the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and the city of Sumy. When talking about these territories, we haven't received anything that can confirm some damage that the Russians managed to deal. Another line we can see from the Black Sea in the direction of the city of Sumy. The sources reported during the previous night, the Russians used Zircon missile, hypersonic missile that can be launched from the sea carriers, from the ships or submarines. Very interesting attack, but as for now we haven't received anything that can confirm damage that the Russians managed to deal as a result of this attack. I believe that during the next 12 hours, we're going to receive additional updates, additional videos and pictures. Maybe the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will give us additional details about this attack. But as for the morning of the 21st of August of 2025, that's it about the massive missile and drone strike that took place during the previous night. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. Very interesting details we got during the previous 12 hours. And first, let's talk about the area for the responsibility of the group of forces East. I would like to remind you that during the previous months, this group of forces was mainly concentrated and focused on taking under complete control the most western part of the Donetsk region. And during July and August, this group of forces was concentrated on offensive operation towards the villages of Novoshatsk, Zelený Gai, and Klivtsova, and every single village in this area was taken by this group of forces somewhere by the beginning of August of 2025. And after that, the armored force of the Russian Federation redeployed this group of forces in the southern direction with the purpose to continue its offensive operation further in the direction of the southern part of Dnipro region and in the direction of the city of Guliai-Polye from the east to the west. So this group of forces began operating, and during the previous 24 hours, additional changes were on the ground were recorded by pro-Ukrainian resources of Deep State. So they made additional changes. Most of the changes were added to our map before based on geolocations we got in the past. But anyway, we see that now this group of forces is completely concentrated on their major offensive operation between the cities of Pokrovsk and Guliai-Polye. The Russians are moving further in the western direction with the purpose to cut this territory in two to get as close as possible to the road RF85 and then to attack the city of Guliai-Polye from the north, and most likely to attack the city of Pokrovsk from the south. So this is the plan of the armored force of the Russian Federation, and during the previous days they were showing us a very huge dynamic in this area. Lots of settlements and villages were taken by the Russians. They published lots of videos that confirmed this information. But the problem is that when the Ukrainians realized that the Russians redeployed their main group of forces of this area further in the southwestern direction, the Ukrainians began their own counter-offensive operation, and as a result of Ukraine's counter-offensive operation, they managed to restore control over huge territories that were lost somewhere in July and at the beginning of August. If we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of August, we will see that by the 16th of August of 2025, this is approximately the moment when Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation, not 16th but 16th. Here we can see how Ukrainians managed to restore control first over the village of Klivtsova. In this very moment, we can see how Ukrainians raised their flag in the most southwestern part of the settlement. So we're talking about this point. Based on this video, by the 16th of August of 2025, we made additional adjustments on the map. So let's take a look at the map once again for better understanding. So this is the situation once again by the end of the 15th of August of 2025, when the Russians almost finished the redeployment process from this pocket, from this part of Donetsk region to the southwestern part, with the purpose to advance further in the Zaporozhye direction. And by the end of the 16th of August, the Ukrainians published video that they managed to restore control over the village because the Russians suffered some shortage with manpower. So the next day, by the end of the 17th of August of 2025, several pro-neutral mappers reported that Ukrainians restored control not just over Klivtsova, but Ukrainians managed to recapture two villages in this area, the village of Klivtsova and the village of Zelený Gai. By the end of the 17th of August, we colored this area as a contested area or the gray zone. Telling the truth, by the end of the 17th of August, I had some doubts whether the Ukrainians indeed managed to counterattack and to recapture all these territories, and I decided to wait a bit more. But now we see that most likely the Ukrainians indeed managed to counterattack this area and to restore control over these territories, because by the morning of the 21st of August of 2025, the Ukrainians published additional video, but this time from the village of Tolstoy. And as we can see, the same brigade answered the village of Tolstoy. And by the way, this 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade published the video from Klivtsova. We haven't received any video from Zelený Gai, but most likely we're gonna see one. Here we can see how two Ukrainian soldiers, and we can clearly see Ukrainian soldiers in this area, raised their flag in the central part of the settlement. Based on this video, we made additional adjustments. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 20th 20th of August, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 21st of August. We see that the 1st Mechanized Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine launched a very successful counter-offensive operation that allowed them to restore control over the villages the Russians were fighting for more than 2 or 3 months in this area, and to re-enter the village of Tolstoy. Most likely the Ukrainians will continue offensive, and they will try to restore control now over the village of Podubne and over the village of Mirne. If the Russians, of course, are not going to do anything with this. We need to understand that this might be very powerful and very dangerous counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side. Of course, now we need to wait what the Russians are going to do with this, but obviously now the Russians have just 2 options. The first option is to stop the Zaporozhye offensive operation, but this is unlikely, and this is something that the Russians most likely don't want to do, and to stop and to redeploy back the group of forces is from this direction back in the direction of the western part of the Donetsk region, with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to restore control once again over these villages. But obviously this will take now time. This can take 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 weeks for the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Or another solution is to redeploy some forces maybe from the area of the city of Pokrovsk with the purpose to stabilize the situation, but this can lead also to probably reduce of Russian offensive or activities in the Pokrovsk direction. So very interesting situation with this area. Obviously the Ukrainians managed to find weak point in Russian defense in the western part of Donetsk region, and most likely the Ukrainians will try to improve their position significantly. As for the Pokrovsk agglomeration, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. The only thing that Ukrainians are saying that currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Rodinska, for the settlement of Krasny Liman, and for the northeastern part of the settlement of Mirnograd. We haven't received anything about the situation in the area of the Russian breakthrough. As for the city of Konstantinovka, currently there are very heavy clashes for this area. The armored forces of the Russian Federation continue improving their positions in the southeastern part of the city and in the southeastern pockets to the east of Alexandrovka Klivtsova, Alexandra Shultina. The Russians continue offensive. This information was confirmed and provided by several mappers. But as for the morning of the 21st of August of 2025, we see that the sources that yes, they reported that the Russians managed to dug in deeper in the southeastern part of Konstantinovka. This morning they reported that the Russians were forced to fall back from the southeastern part, and currently according to them the southeastern part of the city of Konstantinovka is just a gray zone or contested area. So most likely the Ukrainians managed to return or to bring back some reinforcements and reserves, and currently there are very heavy clashes exactly for this area. So of course let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously this upcoming night the Russians will launch another massive missile and drone strike, and they will continue this process for the next several days or weeks, and then the Russians will launch their major offensive. Another important thing that I would like to remind you that on the 24th of August of 2025 is the Independence Day of Ukraine, so most likely the Russian Federation will try to do something before this day to show Ukrainians that the Russians has initiative in their hands completely. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.